Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This will be my full Loki Season 2, Episode 6 finale video. There were a whole bunch of Easter eggs, obviously a huge WTF ending to the series, so we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the videos. And I will address the status of Loki Season 3, like the future of Loki just in general in the Marvel Universe, because his new role makes him basically one of the most powerful beings in the entire Marvel multiverse. Truly burdened with glorious purpose. And careful for spoilers if you have not seen the episode yet. We'll just start at the beginning, work our way through shot by shot, talking about Easter eggs and the many WTF moments. Starting with the episode title, Glorious Purpose, which is the same title as the very first episode. The way that they engineered the episode, it mirrors a lot of moments from the very first episode, show you how much character development he's had since those moments in episode 1. Because remember, this is like Avengers 1 era Loki. This is also meant to reference his true glorious purpose, like his actual purpose, the grander glorious purpose, basically becoming the god of stories Loki and managing the entire multiverse flow of time, basically becoming the center of the multiverse. He was destined for a throne, he was born to it. They have a moment at the end of the episode where he kind of echoes that line, like it's the earlier Loki, but then he time slips in and he starts to realize that his throne that he was born for, quote unquote, is actually God of Time Loki's throne.
Claim my throne.
You want to be king?
I don't want to be, I was born to be.
Burdened with glorious purpose.
There was even a little joke about that at the end when he's actually crafting the throne on the rock where He Who Remains Citadel at the end of time used to be, basically refashioning things into a golden throne for himself to sit on. God of Stories Loki is a huge deep cut for the comics, but the more recent comics, so I'll explain that when we get to those parts of the episode. I know there are all kinds of questions about Avengers 5 Kang Dynasty, like what does this mean for Loki during Secret Wars if he's this powerful? Don't worry, we will address that. The actual opening Marvel Studios title plays in reverse this time because we're coming from the end of episode 5 and he's basically time slipping back to the moment before the timeline exploded. And it almost sounds like the song that they play over is a cover of Pink Floyd's Time from Dark Side of the Moon. The camera coming back in through the timeline itself is also meant to show you things from Loki's perspective, like what it actually kind of looks like when he's time slipping. And the opening scene is basically us replaying events from episode 4 from a reverse perspective. Like there's a small effect and a sound plays to show that Loki has slipped back into his position again, showing us the older version of Loki is now here. Then they basically have what is like a Groundhog's Day for most of the episode until Loki starts to realize what's actually going on. They start out watching the same events play over again. Victor Timely dies again, R.I.P. He dies many times, turns out because of all the time loops, all the different tries that Loki makes. And Loki starts looping back and back again and again and again, trying things just a little bit differently. Some of the tries are meant to be funny, some are kind of horrific. There is a lot of spaghetti, so to speak, in this episode. When he said again, but faster, that also reminded me of the classic George Lucas joke. There's this joke that Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, all the original Star Wars actors used to say about George Lucas is that his only real direction to his actors was again, but faster this time. Again, but faster, over and over again. There are a couple big music and song Easter eggs during the episode too. The music that kicks in here is Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, but the disco version. And the reason why they use this song is because obviously it's a really cool song. But also there's a lot of meaning behind the song that dovetails with Loki's journey through the episode. The actual symphony itself is meant to be about triumph, like the whole concept of triumph just in general, about every hard-won victory there's ever been, ever will be, basically foreshadowing the end of the episode when Loki, after a great effort, is victorious and triumphs by transforming into the god of stories Loki, basically managing all of time. He kind of becomes the god of time, but not quite like that. Like, I'll explain his powers when we get to that part of the episode, because I'm sure there will be a lot of questions about how his new powers work. But one of the first big questions, it seems like there's no limit on the amount of times that he can time slip, and there's no cooldown on the ability either. There are a couple more Victor Timely attempts to make it down the walkway doing different things in each time, and to his credit, each time he makes it like a couple steps further, then he starts time slipping back to earlier points in the timeline. We're still in the middle of episode 4 when this is happening, like most of the episode, especially early on, is him jumping around during the events of episode 4. This is where things start to get a little bit wackier. Like, I loved him interrupting Renslayer and Miss Minutes, who were in the middle of their coup attempt, and Miss Minutes is like, what? We're in the middle of massacring all these different people. Like, this is after she massacred all those people.
Miss Minutes, I know right now you're hurt and you're angry, but we need your help in finishing the throughput multiplier fast.
This time it almost seems like they drag Victor Timely down there, almost kicking and screaming. He tries about 7 more times, and his second quote here, Loki's quote, "I wasted time, and now doth time waste me," is actually from William Shakespeare's Richard II. In essence, the full speech from Richard II means the early bird gets the worm, which is just meant to dovetail with the whole theme of what's happening here. Like, the faster we go, the better chances of success we have. When he says again for the last time, he jumps back even further in the timeline to when they first introduced Victor Timely to OB. They're still in the middle of the events of episode 4, like I said, though. But you can kind of see the progression here, like he keeps going back earlier and earlier and earlier in his own personal timeline of the TVA. Notice during this part of the episode, Sylvie is the only one to pick up on how weird Loki has suddenly gotten. Like, remember, she was also able to retain her memories from when the timeline blew up the first time. Maybe that has something to do with being a variant of Loki, and Loki innately being able to evolve into the god of time. Like, if that ability was within him, maybe some of that ability is also within Sylvie somewhere in there. So maybe that's part of the reason why she can remember certain things and some of the others can't. They whip out the model again, make a bunch of jokes. This is obviously a reference to Back to the Future with the special model. Like, there's only a couple coats of paint on it. It sucks. It's a terrible model. No. What are you talking about? It's amazing. They kind of have their jokes about speed running events here. Like, he volunteers Victor Timely, who doesn't realize what's going on. Like, don't worry, you'll volunteer eventually. And he starts to give away that he knows some of the things that are happening in the future. Some of them start to pick up on the weirdness when they sense that he's basically repeating their dialogue as they're saying it. Like, wait a minute, how did you know what I was going to say? And they have the joke about Loki basically using the ability to learn everything himself. Like, how long could it take me to learn all this engineering, how time works basically? Oh, a couple centuries? Sure, whatever. What's a couple of centuries to somebody who lives 5,000 years? And that's the whole idea. That'd basically be like 4 or 5 years to you or me. So Loki is basically getting a degree, like a 4-year college degree, so to speak, in time itself. When he says he's a fast learner and he's a god, that's also meant to foreshadow him becoming the god of stories. There are a couple moments in the episode where they either other characters reference him being a god, or he himself references being a god, just meant to foreshadow the turn at the end of the episode.
And I'm a god.
This time, they actually do a transition to, quote-unquote, centuries later, like a couple hundred years, hit the fast-forward button. There are a couple moments later in the episode where you sense that there was like a time jump that they just did not tell us about. Like, oh, wait a minute, he's done this thousands of more times, we just didn't see it. I think the special card here denoting the centuries that have passed is just meant to foreshadow that as well. Then basically the idea is that at the end of those couple hundred years of him learning all those things about engineering, about time itself, he jumps back in time to this moment. Then they go down to the control room. There are a couple more jokes about him speed running everything. All the characters also starting to get a little bit weirder. Like even Casey's like, wait a minute, maybe we should test this a little bit. When he's the one to put his head in the temporal aura machine, I actually expected there to be like some twist, but sure enough, it just says, no, it's not you. In this time when he's sending Victor Timely down, notice that he keeps adding all little details, revealing that they've actually done this a couple times already and failed. Like, don't put the device on the platform, it'll roll off. Remember to put duct tape here. Remember to press the button a couple times because it sticks. Like I said, basically smash cutting, like when you see events pick up, like when you see him time slipping, he's actually done things a couple times before we're actually seeing him. So if you really wanted to think about it, if you assumed that he spent a couple thousand years, that He Who Remains reference, like maybe you should spend a couple thousand years doing more loops till you actually get your head around this. If you assume that he actually did that and they just didn't show us that cut, then he's probably spent at least like 2,500 years or so at these different time loops before we get to where he is at the end of the episode. They make it sound like when he time slips back into his body, like he's literally taking over the previous version of his body. So even if he studied to like the day before he would have died of natural causes, if he time slipped back to his body here, it's only his mind that would be older. His actual physical body would be whatever age it is right here. So theoretically, he could live forever by doing stuff like this. Mobius finally starts to call him on all his weirdness, and we finally get to an attempt where Victor Timely is successful in adding the patch, like the hotfix, to the sacred timeline. When he comes back, the whole pumpkins quote sounds like some kind of old-timey victory cheer from the 1800s.
Pumpkins.
Notice that he also calls Loki a wizard when he greets him again as he's coming back, like, wizard, did it work? Then the other shoe drops and they reveal the whole trick behind the loom. Like the loom itself cannot be fixed no matter what. As Victor Timely explains, it's not designed to scale infinitely with the infinitely growing multiverse. Later in the episode, He Who Remains explains sort of the whole mechanic behind how this works. Like, even if it explodes, all that's really happening here is that the loom is resetting, deleting the extra timelines to maintain only the sacred timeline. But while that happens, the collateral damage is that every time the TVA gets destroyed, and he just rebuilds it after that. So for example, at the end of episode 4, when it seems like the timeline explodes and all of reality explodes with it, in reality what was happening is that the loom was just resetting things and preserving the sacred timeline, deleting the extra timelines. In the process of that, just wound up destroying the TVA. So it wasn't all of reality collapsing or dying or anything like that. Then when Sylvie suggests that this is destined to happen the minute that all the timelines started branching, Loki gets the idea to stop her from killing He Who Remains. So it's at this point that I think he has not yet been through all those thousands of different time loops where he learned how to control time without any special movements. Like, there's a point during his conversation with He Who Remains later where it seems like he's learned how to do that. Like, when did he learn how to do that? I think there was like a cut somewhere in his attempts to stop Sylvie from killing him where he sort of paused things and then spent thousands of years doing that. But basically, he jumps back into time right before Sylvie was about to kill He Who Remains and then tries to talk her out of it and stop her many, many times. There's a little bit of new dialogue from He Who Remains here, but like he says later, he knew that this was going to happen, so he's just kind of watching things play out, kind of watching Loki follow the path that he laid out for him. Notice the first time Loki tries to stop her, she says that he's obsessed with a throne. Like, you want this because you're so obsessed with getting a throne. It's obviously meant to foreshadow the end of the episode. Like, when he says it's the last thing he cares about, he's being honest with her, but ironically, he winds up having to take a throne for himself, which is why he smirks at the end of the episode too. Like, that Loki smirk isn't meant to be an evil smirk like at the end of Thor the Dark World. It's meant to be him kind of laughing at Sylvie when she said that you've been obsessed with a throne this whole time, and all the times that he told other people that he was destined for thrones. It's kind of him laughing at his situation, kind of laughing at himself a little bit, like, yeah, you were right. You're right the whole time. There's a lot of He Who Remains deaths during these time loops, though. Like, R.I.P., he dies several times. And the funny thing is, too, is he sort of twists his dialogue from season 1 when he says, "See you soon." It's no longer meant to just be a reference to the Council of Kangs and all of his variants showing up. It's meant to be a reference to Loki seeing him again soon when he time slips again, because He Who Remains knows all about the time slipping. Literally everything that happened during their conversations in season 1 is meant to be him talking to Loki specifically, but the way they framed the conversations during season 1 made it sound like he was talking to both of them. Then He Who Remains confronts Loki with the idea that he'll have to kill Sylvie if he wants to preserve the sacred timeline. And it's the one thing he refuses to do, like he just can't bring himself to do it, which is why he lets her past him a couple times. He Who Remains uses his personal tempad to stop Sylvie, basically put her on pause, and because he's a king, he basically knows everything that's been happening, revealing the whole truth to Loki. Earlier in the season, when Miss Minutes was referencing this grand plan that He Who Remains had to manage things in the event of his death, she was only thinking of Victor Timely becoming or replacing He Who Remains, becoming like the new He Who Remains, when in reality, He Who Remains sort of orchestrated events to help Loki become the god of stories. So the whole idea is that he probably never fully trusted Miss Minutes, like he never told her the full plan and she never figured it out. That's why he starts making fun of Victor Timely, making fun of his stutter, talking about how the loom is basically useless other than to preserve the sacred timeline. When we were talking about season 1 episodes, the whole idea is that He Who Remains is the way the producers explained it. They also confirmed this too, is that he was meant to feel kind of like the Willy Wonka version of Kang. And if you think about Willy Wonka, Charlie the Chocolate Factory story, it's all about Willy Wonka trying to find and train a replacement, like look for the proper replacement, which is basically what he was doing, but it was just for Loki, trying to help Loki put him on this path to evolve into the god of stories. And if it wasn't clear, when he's flicking his finger, like moving Sylvie around, like bring her back, send her away, basically he's just rewinding her in her own timeline so that she just goes to somewhere she was in an earlier episode. Basically confirming that he never intended on just letting Sylvie kill him and for that to stick. Like, she wasn't going to ever be able to perma-kill him because he knew that this would happen, events would repeat, Loki would start repeating his own timeline, slipping around. The quote that Loki has, "We die with the dying, we're born with the dead," is a T.S. Eliot quote. The full quote actually goes like this: "We die with the dying, see, they depart, and we go with them. We are born with the dead, see, they return, and bring us with them." And it's meant to be him understanding He Who Remains talk about reincarnation. Like he says, reincarnation, baby. Within the context of the episode, the reincarnation is because of all the time loops. This is where we get to the reveal that we've actually had way more time loops than they've let on in the episode, when Loki reveals that he can actually stop time with a flick of his finger, the way that he was taunted by He Who Remains earlier, like, see if you can do this after a while. Turns out it's already been a while and they just didn't show us in the episode. Like I said, based on his reactions, I think that the while that they just cut out of the episode, like the missing time period, was at some point during his fights with Sylvie. So there's like a hidden cutout there with like 2,000 years in it. Then he reveals the true details behind the loom and how it's meant to just be a failsafe for the sacred timeline itself. It's only ever meant to protect the sacred timeline, no matter how they alter it. Also interesting is that he doesn't care about the TVA or anyone in it being destroyed. Like, we just rebuild that, it's no big deal. I'll just get more variants of those characters. They definitely make him seem way more sinister than he did in previous seasons. And it also kind of sounds like Renslayer was always his pawn, like he never actually really loved her, or maybe if he did, it was just briefly. But essentially, like later in the episode, when the earlier Mobius from the events of episode 1 are telling him that basically the only reason why he's in this position is because Renslayer allowed it, the real truth is that He Who Remains was secretly behind everything and influenced Renslayer so that she would do this and put Loki in this position so that he would evolve into the God of Stories. So as much as he was trying to orchestrate events and push Loki around his board, like push him down the path that he set out for him, he was also doing the same thing for Renslayer, for Miss Minutes, for pretty much everybody else. And when he tells Loki that his variants are already out there, like there's nothing that Loki is going to be able to do about them, he's talking about the Council of Kangs and how their base is also outside of time in a pocket dimension, kind of like the way the TVA exists. So nothing that Loki does to change the timelines or create new timelines or erase timelines will do anything to affect the Council of Kangs. We'll get into this in a second too when we talk about Avengers 5 Kang Dynasty with like God of Stories Loki, because now it seems like he has way more power. Shouldn't he be able to deal with the Council of Kangs? I'll explain why that's not the case. Just remember they're in the background for like the rest of the episode. Then Loki clocks the equation on He Who Remains blackboard, and so many people after episode 6 in season 1 aired were asking about this, like what was written on the blackboard? It was just out of focus in the episode, so there's like no way you could actually read everything that was on the board. But essentially they just use it in this episode to show you Loki metaphorically saying, I'm going to change the equation, like he's going to destroy the loom and find some other way of fixing things. Remember, his goal is different from He Who Remains' goal. So He Who Remains was trying to preserve a version of a sacred timeline that wasn't great, but it was better than the all-out chaos of the Kang Multiverse War. All that Loki is trying to do is just save his friends, so it's way easier for him to do that than to just preserve a very specific type of timeline. So it's basically He Who Remains telling Loki, you have one of two options, and Loki saying, no, I'm going to come up with a third option. Basically, he's going to win the game by not playing He Who Remains' game. But in order to do that, he has to become the God of Stories, basically sacrifice himself, so to speak. Technically, he's still alive, but he's kind of like taking himself out of the equation, like he has to sit here in this space at the center of all reality, at the center of the multiverse, to help maintain it with his power. No more vacations for Loki. The other funny thing about Loki you may realize in all this too, is that he's like the universe's biggest narcissist. He previously believed himself to metaphorically be the center of the universe. Now he's literally the center of the multiverse. When they bring Sylvie back, we get some dialogue from the earlier trailers when He Who Remains says, around and around we go, make the hard choice. That was in like one of the very first trailers. Then instead of killing Sylvie like He Who Remains expected him to do, Loki jumps back to where he was inside the interrogation room during the events of Season 1, Episode 1, now obviously recontextualizing his speech about wanting a throne, being born for a throne. Now in the new context, the idea of his glorious purpose is that it was always for him to become the God of Stories, a much higher calling, and have a much higher throne, so to speak. Basically on the level of like a lot of cosmic beings in the multiverse, like we're talking about really, really powerful. There are a couple stray Easter eggs here too in the interrogation room, like the soda that Mobius is drinking is the now in real life defunct brand called Jossa. That was a real soda you could have drunk during the 90s. It was only sold from 1995 to 1999, and the joke was that the TVA controls all the time. They can just pluck things out that they want. Even if it goes out of service or it stops being made at some point, the TVA can just continue to use it if they want. Let me know in the comments if you ever actually tasted any of that soda. When they get to the point where he's repeating some of his dialogue from earlier and references Glorious Purpose, that's obviously meant to be a reference to the title of the first episode, but also now the finale in his grander Glorious Purpose. Part of the reason why the title of this episode is Glorious Purpose, the same as the title of Episode 1, Season 1, is to reference the journey Loki's been on. Like it's come full circle for Loki, and he does actually have a real glorious purpose now. There's a bunch of new Mobius backstory too. He tells this story about a hunter who got a bunch of other hunters killed when he hesitated to prune someone, and the idea is that it was him. He was the person that hesitated. He regrets the deaths of his fellow hunters, and Renslayer was the partner who stepped up and helped him. It was right after that that she became a judge and started doing what she's doing now, explaining what their relationship was during season 1. Like, it seemed like they had been old friends for a while. Turns out they used to be partners. Then they explain why everything is turning to spaghetti, and it's Loki controlling things outside of time. It's sort of like a side effect of his power and the way that things are existing here outside of time. He slips back to the end of episode 5 and stops time while Sylvie is talking to him, giving him the idea that he can replace the sacred timeline with something more complex that can handle all the infinitely growing branches in the multiverse. Basically make it so that they don't have to prune anyone anymore. This time, he sacrifices himself by going out on the bridge and references being a new kind of god, which is another reference to him becoming the god of stories from the comics. Transforms his clothing to the god of stories outfit based on the promos with a full set of horns. I also love the fact that he's wearing loafers, like comfy shoes for the god who has everything. Notice he also opened the doors using his power, and he uses his new power to destroy the loom. Like, that's how powerful he's getting here. Then they start to represent the different timelines as physical branches. I think that's because they're outside of time. Like, it's 4-dimensional Loki looking at 3-dimensional time. That's why he's like literally able to grab a timeline like a rope. Essentially, in this space here, Loki is existing in a higher dimension. Then he starts using his new power to bring life back to the branches, like maintain the branches. And when he rips open the tear there, that's basically him ripping open a hole in this dimension where you can see He Who Remains Citadel at the end of time. When it seems like he's stepping on an invisible bridge, stepping towards that rock where He Who Remains Citadel was, that's just him using his power to create this bridge. He's basically walking on the concept of time. Like I said, it seems like he's physically able to influence time. But you probably get the metaphor here, like he's basically becoming Loki who remains, but also God of Stories Loki. Basically taking He Who Remains' place, but doing so with a much better option than He Who Remains had for him. He basically transforms He Who Remains' previous chair, like this is his chair in his office, or what used to be his office, transforms it into a golden throne, which is meant to be a reference back to when He Who Remains said that he got the big chair because he made the hard choices. Now Loki is making the ultimate hard choice, so he gets the big chair, so to speak, but he turns it into his throne that he always wanted. And basically, Loki uses a real big burst of his power to secure all the timelines so that they all function together, they all intertwine, but it winds up looking just like the World Tree. But it's a much more cosmic representation of the World Tree than we've seen before. So I think the idea is this is how existence, reality, was always meant to be. He was always destined to evolve into this role. Then we go back to the TVA, explaining that it's still continuing to function in its old role, but in a more benevolent way, like they're not going around pruning everybody all the time. But they are still policing all the different timelines. The way that B-15 talks about it, they're looking mostly for He Who Remains variants, like they're going after the Council of Kangs. They also bring back Miss Minutes, who's been rebooted. I love the way that Casey and Hunter B-15 kind of react to Obi when they ask him, is she going to rebel against us? Like, is she going to turn into Ultron again? And he kind of shrugs like, I don't know, maybe, she might. I think that's just them teasing the potential for more stories with her crossing over into them. Like, we could always use her as a villain in some future story if we want. When they reference the War Room meeting, the meeting that they're talking about is about deciding what to do about the Council of Kangs next. And I think this is meant to get into the whole idea of like what Loki's new powers are. Like, if he were that powerful, like if he were essentially God in the Marvel multiverse, shouldn't he be able to flick his finger and deal with the Council of Kangs? So I think the idea is they're just going to explain that he's not that powerful. Like, there's some limitations on the way he exists now and the way he helps maintain the timelines. There's also the idea that the Council of Kangs exist in their own pocket dimension outside of time, and if he can only influence stuff that are in the timelines, and the Council of Kangs are not in the timelines, he can't influence them. Mobius reveals they just tracked down another Kang variant in a 616 adjacent universe, obviously 616 reference to Marvel comic book universe, but they're kind of saying that's like the main MCU. When he says adjacent 616 universe, the whole idea is that it's like a universe that's almost like the 616, like most of the stuff is the same, but there are a couple minor differences. And the variant of He Who Remains that they're talking about actually looks like the events of Ant-Man the Wasp Quantumania with that version of Kang the Conqueror. So it's almost like they're saying the events of Ant-Man the Wasp Quantumania were taking in a 616 adjacent universe, not the main 616 universe, which kind of blew my mind just a little bit. Let me know what you thought about that in the comics. Like, were they actually talking about the events of Ant-Man the Wasp: Quantumania? Like, no, this wasn't the real version of Kang the Conqueror. I think the idea is that they want to introduce a bigger, badder version of Kang the Conqueror, and that's why they said that. The other file that he's reading that he requested, quote-unquote, is his own file, like Mobius's original file. All because he's trying to learn more about his original life and find a life for himself on the timeline. That's meant to pay off the whole quote about him leaving the TVA temporarily. I think it's just meant to be temporary because I think he's supposed to be in Deadpool 3 because the TVA is a big character in Deadpool 3. So at some point, he might come back to the TVA. Down in his workshop, OB gets a bunch of new copies of his TVA handbook, 2nd edition. The 2nd edition is probably just updated with a new way the timelines of the multiverse work with God of Stories Loki within his multiverse, so to speak. Notice back in his own universe, Victor Timely no longer gets a copy of the manual, he just goes on making candles and probably eventually does something similar, like he probably does something really great eventually, but just does it on his own steam without any other cheat code manuals. Then they finally bring back Renslayer, like this was kind of one of those storylines that went nowhere for a while, like wait a minute, wasn't she going to be a bigger character? Maybe there was a bigger plan for her at one point, but she wakes up on the Void Planet where we all knew she was going, but I think this is meant to be a flashback because she would have gone there immediately after being pruned, and that was a couple episodes ago. I think that this is meant to be the manhole cover from the Loki bunker in Season 1, implying that she'll survive, and then she sees the storm coming in, which is meant to be Alioth, and her look of determination also makes it seem like she might learn how to tame Alioth, like conquer Alioth, in setting her up as a future, bigger villain. I expect her to appear somewhere in Avengers 5 Kang Dynasty, but there are so many characters during that, we'll see how they wind up pulling that off. Then Mobius goes back to watch his previous life with Sylvie, and it's just meant to pay off that moment from Loki where he told him he could come back anytime he wanted to his old life. The idea is he's basically going to go off and find a life for himself, like make a new life for himself on one of the timelines. Sylvie also makes it sound like when she shrugs, like what are you going to do next? She's just going to go around and have a couple adventures on her own too. She has a TemPad as well, so she can jump around at will. Then they end on a scene of Loki as he currently exists in the middle of all reality, holding all the timelines together with his power at the center of the world tree, the center of the multiverse, so to speak. Like I said, the smirk on his face that they end on is meant to be a mirror for his smirk during Thor: The Dark World, only this time it's a more positive smirk, like he's smirking at himself, like he's laughing at his situation, like this is how things worked out. During the end credits, there's only like one brand new scene, and just like previous episodes, the only scene that changed are the files at the end of the scene. This time though, the contents of the files are all moments from what look like Season 1. Like this is Sylvie in Season 1 on the Void Planet, this is Loki during the events of Season 1, Episode 1, that's why he's wearing his Avengers outfit. I think it's the same for the other characters too, like this is Hunter B-15 and Casey's scenes from Season 1, and this is probably Mobius from Season 1 as well. There's still that same thumb holding all the files up, so I think this is meant to be Hunter B-15's thumb. There are a lot of you that also asked about the post-credit scene, like a secret post-credit scene at the end of Episode 5. The voice was meant to be from the end screen, like the game over screen from the Zaniac video game, just implying that the game itself was over and you had to stick in some more coins.
You died! Insert your coin, loser!
So now I know a lot of you are asking, what does this mean for Loki during Avengers 5, Kang Dynasty, for Secret Wars? Because he is so powerful, shouldn't he be able to be a huge threat against the Council of Kangs? I think what they'll do is they'll probably depower him a little bit, like they'll explain that there's some limitations to his abilities where he can't do things like that. Otherwise, there would be no next Avengers movie, like Loki would just flick his finger and fix every single problem in every single movie. But they did say that eventually they do plan to reunite Loki with Thor, so like for instance, Loki will still continue to be a big character in future stories like future Avengers stories as well. I'll do a couple more Avengers videos for Loki in the next couple of days, just a lot to unpack with all of his new abilities. And as for Loki Season 3, just the way that they end things with his character, it sounds like something really big would have to change for them to bring Loki back and to do a new story with him. So I think if they do Loki Season 3, it would be between Avengers 5 Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars or after Secret Wars. But I do think it was an amazing episode. Loki as a series is generally S tier. It's like one of the best things that Marvel has ever done, so it will be a huge disservice to not do more Loki. The other funny thing some of you may remember from Season 1, Episode 1 is that he had this line where he said, "You crazy bureaucrats have no idea how my story ends."
You ridiculous bureaucrats will not dictate how my story ends!
That obviously now being paid off in the finale for Season 2, where he becomes the God of Stories, changing his own story. I did a video a couple days ago about how Loki in the comics evolved into the God of Stories, like he sort of unlocks this special ability inside him where he can change his own timeline, but it doesn't give him the ability to change the timeline of other characters. I'll post a link for that video down in the description below. There's a whole bunch of stuff coming up. Like I said, I've got a couple more Loki videos that I'm working on. I'll try to post this weekend. The Marvels movie is out right now, so I'll be doing a post-credit scene video next and like a full breakdown Easter eggs like I do for all the big movies. We're also in the middle of Invincible Season 2 episodes, and we're supposed to get What If Season 2 episodes before the end of the year. That'll be like the next big series that they do. I'll be doing episode videos for that just like I did for Season 1. Click here for my Marvels movie post-credit scene video. I'll update the link as soon as I post that. And click here for all my other Loki videos. Thank you so much for watching. Everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.